welcome to the Hoop Collective podcast. We talk about the NBA. It's Thursday afternoon. Joining us from New York City, Tim Bontemps.
Hello, fellas.
And in Dallas, Texas. Just traveled in from somewhere. They let him back into Texas. It's MacMahon.
Howdy, partners. We're not, well, I was going to make a joke, but it's going to end up probably being inappropriate. So, howdy, partners.
You're in Dallas. The Bucks are coming to town.
Yes, sir.
For an ESPN game on Sunday night. Mavericks had a good win.
Or Friday night.
God, that is so
We're off
bad.
to a roaring start.
God, that is so bad. You know what? I'm feeling my age lately because I am making more and more mistakes like that.
Well,
Man, we know Brian. We know Brian struggles with times, MacMahon, but getting days is another level.
I'll say this: days during the NBA season, as you guys know, it's game day, travel day, whatever. So I'm not going to give him too hard a time. It's not like he missed on his own age by 4 years, like one bozo did on the hit show Howdy Partners.
Yeah,
find it on YouTube.
I used to try to push back on that. I wouldn't screw up the time because I live in Central Time Zone, but I operate all times in the Eastern Time Zone, and occasionally I make mistakes. But I've been making a lot of time mistakes several times in the last week, including like for podcasts. I've gotten on and been like, okay, ready to go. Staring at a blank screen.
But we are ready to go, and we do talk about the NBA, so maybe we ought to do a little bit of that.
All right. Anyway, on Tuesday night, I believe, the Mavericks were in Denver, got a narrow win, good win in Denver. Tim Hardaway, who's been playing well lately, had a good game that night. I've been thinking about the Mavericks a bit lately. MacMahon, your team there that you've covered for decades, more than one decade,
decade and change, yeah.
Multiple decades. And it's interesting to me. They're giving me 2008 Cavs vibes. And of course, I'm going to default to that because that was my life back then. I covered the Cavs. The Cavs unexpectedly made the finals in 2007. They were, quote unquote, ahead of schedule. We saw this last year, actually, with the Atlanta Hawks. 2 years ago, the Hawks they pulled an upset of the 76ers. Look, wasn't like the 76ers laid down. They took it from them. They won Game 7 in Philly. They get to the conference finals, and it was like, whoa, the Hawks have arrived. And they really actually hadn't arrived. But because they had that success, they kind of got off schedule, so to speak, and it's completely changed the dynamic in that team. And look, Luka was awesome against the Suns last year. He beat them. The Suns fell apart. They didn't get it done. And the Mavericks were in the conference finals. But I wonder if they were a little off schedule because now it's weird to talk about this because the Mavs just have 2 good wins.
4 good wins, actually. They've gone from dipping under 500 to reeling off 4 wins in a row, 2 of which Luka was able to kick his feet up during the fourth quarter, which obviously is nice given his minutes and usage.
Yeah, what was the win against the Suns the other night? It was the first time they had won a game when he scored less than 30. Is that right? I
believe that to be accurate. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So,
and again, he got to put his feet up in the fourth quarter, just like he did in Madison Square Garden the previous game. So,
right, because they've really been a terrible road team. They got a good win in Madison Square Garden on Saturday. But I'm watching this team, and they're playing better recently, and I'm just wondering, they're in the middle of the pack in the West, where they're going to be at the end of the season, and what having made the conference finals applies a certain amount of pressure to this year. Because I just saw Jason Kidd the other day talking about how the team's relying too much on Luka and how he's kind of getting worried about that. Where do you think the Mavericks are now that they're without Jalen Brunson and they've struggled to have another piece? And I don't know where they're going to get that piece.
All right. And so the whole, hey, we're relying too much on Luka is like, yeah, you lost your second best player, your number 2 creator for nothing, and that happened. Like, we've been over that. Jalen Brunson's not coming back. That's not changing. But it got to a point where they'd lost 4 straight games. Like Luka was either running on fumes at times, or teams were just trapping him way up high on the floor, forcing the ball out of his hands, saying, hey, y'all want to play 4-on-3? We'll take our chances with that. We're cool. It got to a point where, man, they really needed some scoring punch alongside him in the starting lineup. And the fans here were going crazy, calling for Christian Wood. Look, I've said it before, I say again, it's going to take something unforeseen for Jason Kidd to budge on putting Christian Wood in the starting lineup. You mentioned Kidd was sensational in that playoff series against the Suns. So was Brunson, but I'm sorry, Luka. Kidd had a good playoff series too, but Luka, I'm sorry. Never mind Brunson. Two other guys who had great series were Dorian Finney-Smith and what the hell is this thing? Apple computer's going all wacko. Anyways, Dorian Finney-Smith and Reggie Bullock were phenomenal 3-and-D guys playing 40-plus games per night. The threes haven't been going down for them, especially for Bullock. I mean, he's shooting in the 20s on. He literally has not taken a tightly contested 3 all year. He's shooting in the 20 percentile, 20-some-odd percent. Kidd finally pulled the plug on Bullock as a starter, and he plugged in Tim Hardaway Jr. And I'm thinking, man, Hardaway's been stinking up the joint too. Well, lo and behold, called coaching by the gut or whatever, this thing's panned out. Hardaway's been phenomenal in the last 5 games. They still somehow managed to lose to Detroit with Hardaway lighting it up. By the way, Killian Hayes kicked the Mavericks' ass right after Bontemps was just bad-mouthing him on this here podcast. Killian Hayes is he's looking like he might be a player, Bontemps. Your apology. Learn how to speak French because you're going to need to apologize in that band. Anyways,
we'll see about that.
Hardaway in this 4-game winning streak where suddenly, the Mavericks are rolling again. This dude's averaging 25 points. He's made 25 threes over those 4 games, shooting at like 56% from 3. Look, is he going to shoot it at that level? No, but they really need Hardaway to be a legitimate complementary scoring threat for this team to have any chance to.
And do you think he can do this for a long time?
He's streaky.
Obviously he's not shooting. He's not shooting 56% on threes, but
he's streaky. I do think that he does have a really good feel of playing off of Luka, whether it's, some set plays that are designed to get him looks or just kind of, a feel for respacing when Luka drives, getting open. I think offensively, with Hardaway in the starting lineup, Finney-Smith, he had a good game against Denver the other night. He'll shoot better than he has so far this season. I think, Christian Wood coming off the bench with some firepower there. I think the Mavericks are going to be fine offensively. To me, the big risk when you plug Hardaway into that starting lineup is that's him, Luka, Dinwiddie. That's 3 minus defenders in your starting lineup. So that's where I question that. And Luka, Bontemps, you heard this, I believe, in New York. Or maybe it was Boston when he said this. But Luka's taken great pride in becoming a much better defender. He's got this thing. Sean Sweeney, the Mavericks defensive coordinator, Jay Kidd's right-hand man, at one point last year told Luka, you're the 450th best defender in the NBA. So
my man Sean doesn't mince words.
No, and he's got the relationship with Luka where he can talk that kind of trash to him. And, it's like truth and jest type of thing, but he was trying to light a fire under his large buttocks.
In fairness, with the 2 ways, there's actually now 490 guys in the NBA.
So Luka going into late last season, because they did obviously make a massive leap defensively in the second half of last year and ended up top 10, I think 7th overall for the year. But going back to last year and certainly continuing into this year, Luka he'll make a play defensively and he'll run by the bench and be like 125. It went from 200 to 175. I don't know how high he might. For all I know, it might be in double figures now. But, so Luka is taking a lot of pride on that end. He is among the league leaders in steals and deflections. Obviously, they're always going to put him in a position where he's guarding the fourth or fifth, option, and he's, able to be a help defender. He's got good hands. He can see the floor well, defensively instincts, that sort of thing. But wait, if Luka's guarding the fifth option, Hardaway is guarding who? Oh, wait.
Yeah.
And then wait. Dinwiddie's guarding who? And who? Bullock was the one who would defend point guard. So when you play, if you see Memphis in the first round, who's guarding Ja? Oh, no, you're going to see Steph. Okay, who's guarding Steph Curry? I'm just saying I have some pretty significant defensive concerns with the new starting lineup. But it's worked so far.
Yeah, I just think from 30,000 feet as I watch the Mavericks, and they're playing well right now. So I don't know. I'm just wondering how they're going to get better coming off of the conference finals. They've set the bar where they've set it, and they've played well this week. I mean, you don't go into Denver and win.
Yeah.
It's a good win. But I'm just wondering, ultimately they're going to need another star player.
Yes.
I think we can all agree with that. So how do they get that guy? And when do they get that guy? And does making the conference finals last year, if they don't do that this year, then it feels like it's a backtrack. I'm just wondering what their medium-term outlook is.
Well, I don't necessarily think success is going to be a linear climb here, right? Like, look, they were a surprising Western Conference Finals team that then lost its second best player. Got Hardaway back from injury, traded for Christian Wood, which there's been some moments where that's been a good thing, some moments where you wonder if he's going to be here after the trade deadline. But to be a bona fide contender, they clearly need a second best player. And, I think the best candidate to eventually be a co-star on this roster is a kid who just got sent back down to the G League because he's only gets garbage time in the NBA. That's Jaden Hardy, a rookie who was projected to be a high lottery pick, stunk it up for the Ignite last year. Mavericks get him in the second round. He goes to the G League this year, scoring an efficient 30 per game. But the keyword in that whole thing was eventually. 3, 4, 5 years down the road, maybe he can develop into that guy. That's not an answer to your question now. But it's a tough situation because punting on the Porzingis thing, I think was the right thing for this franchise to do, but also an admission of that huge swing that you took was a strikeout, and you still owe a pick to the Knicks. So how exactly? I think they've got to. Get through this year, complete that trade by giving up the last pick, and then be ready to pounce on the next star that becomes available via trade. Hopefully, a guy who kind of nudges his way into saying, "Hey, I want to compete for a championship, and playing with Luka would help me do that." And they got to be ready to bundle up. I always say their version of the Drew Holiday trade, to bundle up a whole bunch of picks to make that happen.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think if you look at where Dallas is at and you look at the picks that they, like you said, the situation they've been in with the Porzingis trade for the past few years, they've been encumbered in terms of their ability to do stuff. You get through this year's draft, they have all their picks going forward. They can hand over the whole suite of picks, and that's really what they have to go get guys. Josh Green has really turned into a nice piece.
Mm-hmm.
Jason Kidd's talking him up a bunch. Piece looks like to me a long-term starter for them, on the wing. As a combo forward who can guard, and you talk about the lack of defense. He's becoming a really big time defensive piece for them. A guy who can do a lot of things. But yeah, I mean, if they can't swing a trade for this kind of player, if this kind of player comes available, like, it is hard to see the path. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
MacMahon, you know this. How long have we been waiting for the Mavericks to hit big on a free agent? At least a decade, right? Every year for years, it was, the Mavs are going to sign this guy. They're going to sign this guy. They're going to sign this guy. They struck
signed
out.
DeAndre Jordan.
Hey, right. They signed Kemba Walker. I mean, it was a few years and a couple buyouts after they offered him a max contract. Oh, wait, they didn't offer him a max contract because technically nobody was tampering, despite the fact he took a max deal from Boston as free agency started, and 4 or 5 days after it was reported that he was taking that deal from Boston and declining the max. Anyways, they got Kemba Walker.
They did. But they just don't have the talent to be a real championship contending team. They've got Luka and a bunch of okay players. And like that in the regular season is a formula, can get you wins at Phoenix, can get you wins in Denver, they're going to be a good regular season team because Luka is one of the best players in the world. But it's not a formula that's going to allow them to be a real championship contending team. And look, like we're starting to hit a point where you start to look at Luka coming up on a potential supermax extension. We're into his second contract now. It's, you've mentioned it a couple times the past couple months, MacMahon. It's like, it's starting to get to the point where you have to start to see what the roadmap is going to be for this team to be a championship contending team. You mentioned the Jrue Holiday trade. Giannis signed his supermax extension when?
Right
after the
afterwards.
Bucks traded for Jrue Holiday, right?
Right.
They made that move. They went all in. They had him. By the way, they also had Chris Middleton, who's twice as good as anybody on Dallas's roster right now with Giannis. So then you have all three of those guys. And it's like, all right, here's our team. I'm going to sign up for this now. The Mavericks are 2 players away from being in that situation. They don't have their Chris Middleton and they don't have their Jrue Holiday right now. So yeah, this is one of the bigger questions I think in the league going forward is how do the Mavericks approach the next couple of years, and who is the player, or can they find the player that can be that 1A for Luka? Because like you said, MacMahon, when they made the Porzingis trade, it was, Mavericks are lined up. They've got Luka, they've got Porzingis.
Young co-stars for the next decade plus.
That's right. Pick and pop combo, right? Terrific shooting.
I mean, Rick Carlisle went on the radio, was talking about a bigger version of Nash and Dirk.
Yeah.
Went on the radio the day the trade was done.
Look, I'm in New York now. I remember being in New York the day that Porzingis trade was made. And obviously everybody here reacted for different reasons, but that was a huge deal at the time. And it looked like, all right, Dallas is set. And, I think, for many reasons, I do think it was the right move for them to move on from him when they did. But like you said, it's also a very clear admission that move didn't work. And so you're already down one big swing. You maybe only have time for one more really big swing.
This is why I talk about, it gives me Cavs 2008 vibes, because the Cavs made the finals in 2007 ahead of schedule, but the big guy that they had on that roster next to LeBron that they wanted to be his running mate was Larry Hughes. And I know that it doesn't exactly compare to Kristaps Porzingis, but that was the guy that they spent a ton of money on, and they realized that Larry Hughes wasn't good enough. So over the next 3 seasons, they kept trying to figure out, how do we get that guy in here? They go for Ben Wallace at one point. They go for Shaq. They go for Antoine Jameson.
Try to get Amari.
They tried to get Amari. They tried to get a lot of guys. Couldn't get it.
Right.
Couldn't get it done. And meanwhile, the rest of the East got better, particularly the Magic and the Celtics. And next thing you know, LeBron's like, I'm gone. Now, I don't want to jump to that conclusion. I'm just saying, Mavericks can correct that. And the one thing that Dallas has that Cleveland didn't is it's a little bit desirable of a location, comparatively speaking.
I mean, it's a lot more desirable than Cleveland. Come on, Mr. Northeast Ohio.
I don't want to.
And you know anybody who wants to go on vacation in Cleveland?
No, I don't.
I mean, there's also no state tax, which is a real thing. There's a lot more advantages in Dallas.
I know, but they've never gotten anybody. Just saying.
I'm not going to say what I just had dinner with Chandler Parsons the other night. What do you mean they never got anybody? He was sitting right next to Mark Cuban, who gave him a max contract at the game that night. Mother bleeper. We actually told that story at dinner.
One of the great MacMahon did this story about before Chandler Parsons was going to be a free agent. Why don't you?
No, this was actually after it was about the bromance breakup. This was after he landed in Memphis for that contract that the Grizzlies folks are
Will
glad
you just
they
please real quick tell
away.
The story that was in that.
Long story short, all right. I'll tell the Cliff Notes version. This is Parsons' second playoff series for the Mavericks, in which he played 0 seconds in because he'd undergone season-ending surgery for the second time. And we're up in Oklahoma City. David Lee was hurt at the time too, and they go to a club called the Dollhouse, which was not a gentleman's establishment, but like a fun burlesque type of bar in Bricktown in OKC. And Amy Schumer just done a show there. She comes in with her crew, and everybody's having a good time. Drinks.
What a night in OKC.
Yeah, I have. You can have good times up in Bricktown. Anyways, drinks are flowing, and they're talking trash to each other, and it's like a bunch of Parsons buddies are there too, and they start talking trash about Parsons. He had a third year, $15 million, which was max at the time, player option. Everybody knew he was going to decline that with a cap soaring, and they start talking trash about the negotiations, and it's like good fun or whatever. Well, at the end of the night, Cuban pays what I believe was a pretty large tab, and he has a cab coming to pick him up in the alley behind the place. Parsons and his boys jump in the cab, hand the cabbie $100, and say, "Take off," like ditch him.
Leave Cuban.
Yeah, leave Cuban. So as Cuban's walking out the back door, the cab takes off. Parsons rolls down the window and yells, "Max or nothing, mother."
The answer was nothing.
The answer was nothing. Parsons told me that story the next day at shoot around. I said, I don't know when, but I'm going to write that at some point. And then when I told him, hey, I'm writing this whole bromance breakup story, I said, I'm going to use the Max or nothing story. And his question was, how are you going to get that word in there?
How'd you get on this podcast? I remember Cuban telling the story.
I'm making our producer Jackson put in some work. Yeah, you got to tell the full version with a bleep on that one.
If you pay the ESPN Plus, you can get the unedited. Just kidding. I remember Cuban telling the story of after winning the title in Miami, he went over to live club in South Beach, and they were trying to buy Magnums and all this kind of stuff, and
they succeeded.
His black card got denied because he had apparently he switches his cards out regularly, and he had gotten a new American Express black card, but he hadn't activated it. And this one was void. And so he just won the title. He wants to celebrate. And his credit card got denied. Anyway, we're off track.
By the way, somebody should write a book about like the pressure that's on an NBA franchise when they draft a prodigy like Luka. Somebody should get a book deal on that. Do you know an agent, a publisher, Wendy?
I do, actually.
All right.
I think somebody signed to do that book, and it wasn't me.
Yeah.
Somebody who spent all last summer in Slovenia and in other places in Europe.
It's in the works, and there's been a lot of, there's a lot of things that have been interesting in the Mavericks organization. I do still look, that story is still unfolding. They've got a chance to get it right. And Luka is in year one of his Supermax extension. Matter of fact, my buddy Joe Trahan, the head honcho at the local ABC affiliate, recently had an interview with Luka, and he asked him about kind of the perception of, the worry for fans of, hey, if they don't win, Luka might leave. And, Luka was like, I wouldn't worry about it. What am I signed for? 5 years? Well, it's 4 years plus a player option. So not really. But I think they have a 2-year window here this season and next season going into that summer. I think they've got a 2-year window where, like Milwaukee did with Giannis, I think in that window, they really need to convince Luka that he has a chance to contend year in and year out right here in Dallas. If they can't get it done in that 2-year window, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that he's going to force a trade or ask for a trade. I'm just saying at that point, if he's not happy, he has all the leverage in the world if he would be looking to leave. I'm also not going to pretend like I know his innermost thoughts. But obviously if I'm around this team on a regular basis, I know people who do know Luka well. I don't think Luka will look for reasons to leave. I think he'd be perfectly happy spending his entire career in Dallas. But if he doesn't have to look for reasons and they're slamming him in the face, that's a problem. And he's also a guy who is a ruthless competitor, which means he loves winning. He's used to winning. He won championships with Real Madrid. He's won a championship, Eurobasket championship with the Slovenian national team. He also detests losing, like can't handle it. And whether it's cards, ping pong, but especially NBA games. I don't know if he loses a lot in beer pong. But like I was talking to Vlatko Chanchar, his Slovenian national team buddy, was talking about like the vibe with their national team and kind of what they're doing. And they play a bunch of cards, they play a bunch of ping pong, stuff like that. He says Luka can win 10 straight ping pong games. He loses once and it's like he just like those tantrums, like he just gets so pissed off.
Can you imagine Luka
losing with this guy's? What's that?
Can you imagine Luka as a tennis player?
I've seen it.
Do to the chair official?
Oh, I didn't stay for Dirk's entire tournament, but so I don't believe there was any temper tantrums there. By the way, the tournament that Steve Nash won this year, the afternoon before the Nets Open training camp. Which was also pretty funny. Yeah, right. The last good day until he got fired, or mutually decided to leave. But no, so it's going to be an interesting couple of years for the Mavericks. I would not hold your breath for them being able to solve their number one concern this year, simply because of the pick they still owe on the KP thing. I just think it's awfully hard to do.
Do we have trivia?
We do.
Okay.
Leads into our next topic.
Okay.
Big shoes to follow after I took over last week.
Well, let's relax. You did as minimal work as possible, and as my guy Stats Williams, who gave me this stat, said, you messed up the stat as you tried to read it off of the Slack machine. So,
then I got it right. All right, butt face.
Well, I'm just pointing out that you got it incorrect. But by the way, as a quick aside, our guy Stats Williams was mentioning a story that our old ESPN colleague Andrew Marchand wrote in the New York Post this week about his longtime girlfriend, Sarah Langs, who was diagnosed with ALS at 29. She works for MLB Network. There's been a lot of talk about it, but he wrote a remarkable story, and our guy Stats, who we all work with a lot, has been going through a lot with that. And you should all take the time to read it.
She's 29 years old, diagnosed with ALS, which is one of the worst things you could possibly imagine. And she's still working. She was at the winter meetings in San Diego, working for MLB Network, covering the signings that all went down the last few days.
Yeah, both she and Matt are two of the nicest and brightest people that you'll meet. So you should take the time to read it. But our guy has a trivia question for the two of you. We'll see how you do with it.
It's time to knock that new business idea out of the park with Shopify, the all-in-one commerce platform to start, run, and grow your business. Forget the off-season work. Shopify makes it simple to sell to anyone from anywhere. Whether you're selling warm-ups or wall hangers, it's time to start selling with Shopify and join the platform simplifying commerce for millions of businesses worldwide. With Shopify, you'll customize your online store to your brand. Discover new customers and build the relationships that create those die-hard fans. Shopify fields all the sales channels to grow a winning business. From an in-person POS system to an all-in-one e-commerce platform, even across social media platforms like TikTok, Facebook, and Instagram. And thanks to 24/7 support and free on-demand business courses, Shopify is on your team every step of the way. It's how every minute new sellers around the world score their first sale with Shopify, and you can too. Shopify is the secret to becoming a business champion by making it simple for anyone to sell their products anywhere, taking the guesswork out of selling. When you're ready to take your winning idea to the world, team up with Shopify, the commerce platform powering millions of businesses down the street and around the globe. Try out Shopify for free today and start selling anywhere.
Now it's time for Hoop Collective Trivia.
So last week, LeBron became, he moved into 6th all time in assists, passing Magic. He will be in the top 5 probably in January. Who was the last player to be in the top 5 in both points and assists all time?
implying that he's no longer there. Is that what you're implying?
Oscar Robertson would be my first guess, but it seems too easy.
That is the answer of the first phase of the trivia question. So he was bounced out by
I can't believe how good I am at this.
So hold on. We'll see how you do on the second part. So Stats thought that was going to be very Stats thought that was going to be very easy. So he had a second part of it. There are 4 players in the shot clock era who have been in the top 5 in both points and assists. Oscar Robertson's one of them. Who are the other 3?
4? In the shot clock era?
Like who have fallen out of it since then?
All time? They've been top 5 all time in both? That surprises me.
Yes. So Oscar's obviously the last one to fall out of it. So who are the other 3?
Was Wilt ever top 5 in assists? No, he wouldn't have been top 5 in assists. Bob Cousy didn't score enough points.
Bob Cousy is one of them.
Did he? Well, I guess there was only
Bob Pettit.
I was hoping one of you would guess Bob Pettit, McMahon's favorite all-time great player, but Bob Pettit is not one of them.
All right, so we're dealing with like old Chuck
it's
Taylor
guys from
era
Guys from that era.
Ah, Lordy.
One of them you are definitely not going to get. One of them I think you should. I didn't think you'd get Bob Cousy.
All right. Oscar Robertson, Bob Cousy.
It's a one-man game, by the way.
Brian's not even.
So I'm dealing with like 50s and 60s?
Not 50s. Well, one guy in the 50s who you're not going to get, and then one guy in the 60s and 70s who you should get.
Tiny Archibald didn't.
Tiny Archibald was later than that.
He was in the 70s, jackass.
There's one very obvious hint that you didn't play in the 60s, buddy. There's one very obvious hint that I would give, but then you will immediately get the answer.
Well, help me out because we got a lot of stuff to get to.
The guy is the logo of the league.
Oh, Jerry West. I wouldn't have thought he'd be up there in assists, but okay.
Jerry West is Dolph Shays, who was Bob Pettit's contemporary in the 50s. You were never going to get. So,
by the way, JJ Redick, he's the one who's always killing Dolph Shays. He's talking about let him play prime Dolph Shays one-on-one. So, like,
Dolph Shays has got a statue put up for him in Philly for the Sixers, where he was a Hall of Fame player for the franchise. So there you go. There's your stats. There's your stats.
How did this lead to the next topic?
He did it against the Suns last week, so it goes into talking about the Suns, I believe.
It was a winding route to the next topic.
It was a roundabout. We got distracted by going through it. So
the Suns have had a rough week. They'd gotten to number 1 in the West, which it wasn't an impressive climb. They've had a lot of stuff that they've dealt with, but Devin Booker was scorching hot about a week ago. They got to first in the West. I think over the course of 4 games, he averaged 40 points.
DeAndre Ayton was playing the best basketball of his career.
Oh, man. So Wednesday night, I want to say maybe the 5th possession of the game for the Celtics. It was early in the first quarter. The score was still in the single digits. Grant Williams gets the ball on the perimeter, drives in, and just slams in to DeAndre Ayton. Just slams into him, creates a little separation, and just throws a hook shot over his hand. And after it goes in, he turns around. And how tall is Grant Williams? 6'5"?
Yeah.
He gives.
I think they listed him at 6'6". Oh, did he give him too small?
He gave DeAndre Ayton the too small. Like
Grant likes to flex and to do that. He likes to do both.
It definitely fits in his personality, but it also fit into the personality of that game, which was the Celtics decided to come into Phoenix and let them know that they were the better team. And Chris Paul had been out for almost a month with a leg injury. I'm not
exactly a month.
A heel injury.
They said it was a heel injury. I think he was protecting his Achilles, but
okay. Makes sense.
I don't think it was an Achilles injury. I just think he was trying to make sure his Achilles was safe.
All I know is a month ago, Chris Paul claimed to me that it was not a big deal and he was not going to miss much time, and he sat out for an entire month.
Anyway,
he also claimed the same thing after he shredded his hamstring.
That's my point.
5 of a conference finals once.
Just to be clear, he didn't have. I don't think he had an Achilles injury. I think he was just making sure his leg was okay so that his Achilles would be okay. And, Cam Johnson is out. Jay Crowder is in Atlanta. And, they've been dealing with some adversity, but, they've gotten to a good place. And they've been slammed, I think, 3 of their last 4 games. They lost to Houston at home. And then
despite having like 6 shots to win it at the end.
Yes. They lost by 1, I believe, in that game.
Then I met them in San Antonio, and boy, they look good against those Spurs.
Yeah. Then they went to Dallas. So
the Spurs should be relegated at this point.
Well, honestly, I have a simple explanation for what happened here. Okay. The Rockets thing, like, okay, that's a fluke. They come to Dallas. That's the game where Odell Beckham Jr. sat in Jerry Jones' seats, which are right next to the visiting bench. So Odell Beckham Jr., a couple Cowboys All-Pros, Micah Parsons, and Diggs. Why am I blanking on Diggs' first name? Trayvon Diggs. And then there was this 4th dude. I didn't know who the hell he was. And, what I'm not thinking much of it. And then my wife, the IT department here, she texts me. She's watching the game. And she texts me about, hey, that guy next to it. I didn't even ask her. She brought it up for some reason. That's Chris Jenner's man. That's Corey Gamble, Chris Jenner's man. I said, oh, okay. And so then Booker comes over post game, despite the fact that they got their butts kicked, and he's chatting him up. He's obviously, I guess, an ex-boyfriend of Kendall Jenner. What I'm getting to I'm getting to the Suns have been hit with a Kardashian curse, and this has nothing to do with recent Twitter activity. I'm just telling you that, the Kardashian curse has hit them. They got their asses whooped that night, and then we saw what happened in the next game.
It usually works the other way. Not when you break up and then it goes bad. Usually it's.
But then Corey Gamble, who apparently is like a little Kardashian character, he comes over, he's hanging, and it's like all that mojo got back in him. That's what's happened here. That's my analysis.
Great job.
It's great.
Well
it's great
done.
Analysis.
Here's my analysis. Their defense has fallen off a cliff in the last 5 games. They were a top 5 defensive team. They were, even with all those injuries and all that stuff. And I wrote this piece that came out yesterday before the game about how they and the Celtics had dealt with adversity. They were top 5 offense and top 5 defense. They were getting it done. And their defense has fallen off a cliff. They're 20th in the NBA over the last 5 games. And when you watch them play, Devin Booker has had, as hot as he was, he's kind of gone cold. He had 17 points against the Celtics, one of his lowest outputs of the season, if not the lowest. And when you watch that game,
he had 11 points the game before that, which
oh my God,
was his lowest.
I didn't even realize that.
So he's hit a rut. He's hit a rut. But go on.
This is what I wanted to talk about. Like every team hits ruts, but when you watch the Suns, you feel that they don't have the resilience. Well, that's not the wrong word. They don't have the sort of firepower that you felt them have last year.
Yeah, they don't have the talent. It's kind of a problem. Like
they're missing the guy who started at power forward for them last year, and the guy who they decided to start over that guy. That's a problem.
And you know who else they're missing? Chris Paul. They're missing Chris Paul because since game 3 of the conference finals, the Chris Paul from before is gone. I don't know if it was like a Monster situation where they took his powers away for that game, or something happened, or what. He was terrible the back half of that series. He's come into this season. He's been pretty terrible across the board. Mm-hmm. He's scoring under 10 points a game.
Right.
And under 40% from right. But even when he's played, forget the time he was out. He's shooting under 40% from the field. He's scoring under 10 points a game. He has no real ability to get his own shot anymore. If the Chris Paul from the past couple of years doesn't come back, like the rest of this stuff doesn't matter. The Jay Crowder thing doesn't matter. The other stuff doesn't matter because this team is just not good enough. Like that was where it all, he had the great series against New Orleans. He got him through that series when they were dealing with, I think Devin had a hamstring injury, if I remember right, against New Orleans. Missed some time. Yeah. He comes back, and like ever since game 3 of that series against Dallas, he hasn't been the same player. And that's the bottom line. Like, yeah, you look at their team, they don't have the firepower. Their 2 power forwards are out. Chris Paul is not right. Their bench isn't very good to begin with. Like they got by on smoke and mirrors this year to this point to be the best team in the West, but they're just not that good.
Ayton plays like out of every 3 games. That's not a true 3 games, but you take a 3-game sample at Ayton. One game, he's an absolute monster. One game, you're like, okay, he played good. And one game, he's like, not that great. And so that inconsistency with Ayton shows up more when their talent is down elsewhere. And Mikal Bridges, I am a big believer in him having more to give, but he doesn't do it on a night-to-night basis. So you really feel how more fragile they are. You just look at them and you feel like they're a more fragile team this year than they were last year. Now, look, they are still second as of right now. The New Orleans Pelicans moved ahead of them.
Second tie with the Grizzlies now.
Yeah, so it's not like they have a good week followed after this bad week. They're right back there, but just on balance, when you look at like last year, you watched them play and you were like, that is a championship contender. It didn't turn out that way. Right. They were great on the road. They were great defensively. They were great in the clutch. Like they checked every box.
Well,
Booker was an all NBA player. Chris Paul, all NBA player. You're not afraid of him right now.
Well, look, we talked about
Williams comes in there and suns DeAndre Ayton 2 minutes into the game.
Yeah, we talked about it a lot last year, right? When you win a ton of games in the clutch, like it's a sign that you like. Obviously, it means that you're effective in those situations. It also means you're in a lot of close games that can go either way, right? And at some point, it's probably going to regress back the other way to some degree. So obviously, that's a bit of a fickle thing. And on top of that, like you mentioned, DeAndre Ayton sort of bouncing in and out of being of having a bigger role with that team. Cam Payne is averaging more shots per game than DeAndre Ayton. Like DeAndre Ayton is 4th on the team in shots per game. Now it's 11.9 for Bridges, 11.8 or 10.8 for Cam, and then 11.7 for DeAndre Ayton. So they're all about the same. But DeAndre Ayton shooting 62%, and he's taking the 4th most shots on the team. Like with all these injuries, if he was going to take a step forward and be a 22 to 25 point player instead of a 16-point player, this would be the time to do it. So he's a good player,
to your point,
but he's probably not going to do that.
Jackson, our producer, tells us the Suns are 2-5 in games decided by 3 points or less.
Yeah, I mean, it's just
last year they were like
1100 and right. They were like 1102.
6-0 in their first 5 games. So decided by 3 points or less.
Yeah, and they're still a really good team. Devin Booker's taken massive steps forward. He's a bona fide MVP candidate. Like Monty Williams is a great coach. They have a great system there. Like they're going to win a lot of regular season games, but it's sort of a similar thing to Dallas. Like you look at their roster. They're better than Dallas talent-wise, but if Chris Paul doesn't make that return back to where he was, and if they don't add more to this team, either in terms of another big-time player or some more help off the bench, you just look at the other teams they're trying to go up against, and like look at Boston last night. You stack Boston's talent up next to Phoenix's, they're just not as good. Close.
And, the other thing, you worry about like the workload on Booker, just like you worry about the workload on Luka. And hey, Booker went through, or he's in the midst right now of his first little slump of the season. Well, before these 3 games, when it's been 3 straight blowouts, one when they beat what's left of the San Antonio Spurs, then got their butts kicked in Dallas, butts kicked at home by Boston. Before that, I believe he was leading the league in minutes, plus having to, basically he's been their point guard. Like Cam Payne plays some point, but Devin Booker has been their primary offensive initiator, the guy bringing the ball up the floor for most of the month that Chris Paul missed. So, I know he's 26, I believe, just early in his prime. But dude, you can't expect a guy to carry that kind of workload, leading the league in minutes every single night and not have fatigue be a factor. And I think he's probably dealing with a little bit of that. I think Mikal Bridges, whose minutes are also, sky high up near the top of the league. He's dealing with that because
plays.
Right, he's never missed a game, and he's always guarding the other team's best player. He's not as much of an offensive initiator, but he's I believe their 3rd leading scorer. But he's working his butt off on the other end. So when you have a lack of depth, before the injuries, then you pile the injuries on, like. Even though these guys are young, like you're taking risks there.
Yeah. So I don't know. I feel like in 10 days we could be doing another pod. We're like, man, the Suns have been great the last week. Chris Paul's back, but he hasn't been back. They need him.
And what's crazy is he can go out there hobbling around, looking his age, and he's averaging 9.5 assists with few turnovers, and he can still do some things. You're like, geez, he's a total non-threat as a scorer at this season. He's been a total non-threat.
He's still a benefit. He still does things that benefit your team, to your point, MacMahon. But like you said, the bigger issue is on a team that already was a little suspect in terms of having enough firepower. If he's out there and is only basically a catch and shoot guy,
he's not a catch and shoot guy. He's shooting 27% from three, and teams are putting a bullseye on him defensively.
Well, that's the other problem too. Like he's just, he looks old. Finally, he finally looks like an old player after years of being a metronome. He finally looks like he's old.
By the way, the team that just passed him to be in first place in the West, the Pelicans. Let me give you the last 5 Zion Williamson games.
Ooh, boy.
23 points, 8 rebounds, 8 assists. 33 points, 10 rebounds, 5 assists. 30 points, 15 rebounds, 8 assists. That was at San Antonio. Nonetheless.
22 potential assists in that game, by the way. Easily should have had a triple-double.
You were at that game, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Then Denver. 25 points, 6 rebounds, 4 assists. Detroit. 29, 10, and 5.
Give me the free throw attempts in those 5 games, because I think this is an important stat.
Well, the one you just had 1, but the last 4, 12, 13, 11, 11. Also, I'm going to tell you he's always been a high percentage shooter, but in the last 7 games, I'm just eyeballing it here.
Mm-hmm.
He's got to be shooting close to 70% in his last 7 games.
Yeah. Trey Murphy III, who's a really good young shooter for the Pelicans. He told a story after that Spurs game where Zion's on the free throw line, which he was a lot that night. And one of the Spurs says to his teammate, he says, bro, keep him from going left. And the other Spur replied, bro, I'm trying. It ain't easy. The guy is in shape, explosive, and boy, is he playing well right now.
You watch his highlights, and he goes left every time. He does occasionally go right. He can handle the ball. I mean, I'm giving you those assist totals. They're putting the ball more in his hands like they did before he got hurt.
Point Zion is back.
Yeah. He, by the way, also, Bontemps has long talked about how his defensive playmaking at Duke was breathtaking. We forget about that.
Mm-hmm.
Let me give you blocks last 5 games. 3, 2, 1, 1, 1. So he's got, he's averaging basically almost 2 blocks. Steals. He's got last 7 games. He looks like he's averaging about almost 2 steals a game. He had 1 game where he had 5 assists, 4 steals, and 2 blocks.
He had a block against San Antonio. I don't remember who it was against, but it looked like a volleyball spike. I mean, he just went up and spiked that thing in the 4th row. It hit an empty seat. There was a bunch of them.
They blew the Raptors out. Just listen to the stat line he had against the Raptors. 12 of 15 shooting, 9 of 12 from the line, 10 rebounds, 5 assists, 2 blocks, 33 points, plus 19. I mean, good golly. This is the Zion they've been waiting for. I mean, I wouldn't go so far as to say he's become a good defender again, but he's become more of a playmaking defender. And they now have, and this is to me one of the most surprising stats of the year in the NBA at this point.
Mm-hmm.
The New Orleans Pelicans are 3rd in the NBA in defense.
Wow.
And 1st in the West. And Zion's a big reason, a big factor.
I mean, let's settle down with that. Let's settle down with he's a big factor.
Settle down with it.
You don't think he's a big factor?
He's had
being first.
Here, hold on. We've got to come up with a little thing for the urine soaked wet blanket, because here he comes, just cold.
No.
uncomfortable. Here comes Bontemps, the urine-soaked wet blanket.
I've just been listening to you guys just extol how Zion has become a world-class defensive player. He's had a good couple of weeks on defense. Like I need to see a little more than 12 days before I say he's a big factor in why I thought you were going to say he's a big factor in why they're third in the league in defense. I don't believe that to be the case. I think he's a big factor
why they're first in the Western Conference.
That I agree with. I'm just saying, to me, the whole key with the Pelicans, we know they're going to be a good offensive team, right? Zion is obviously, when he's healthy, and he's been healthy this year, to me, the biggest thing is 19 games played. Let's keep seeing that game number go up. Like we all want to see him on the court. Obviously, with him, Jonas Valanciunas, Brandon Ingram, CJ McCollum, their offense is going to be really good. If their defense remains in the top 5 or even in the top 10, you can look at this team like a legitimate, contender to get out of the West. I mean, you look at their numbers right now, they're 6th in offense, 3rd in defense, 3rd in net rating. At least going into last night's games. I haven't looked at it this afternoon. That's a, championship caliber rankings across the board. But I need to see those numbers stay there for longer. They've had some benefit in scheduling too, like they beat Golden State by like 60, and both games in Golden State, or they played Golden State at home. The Warriors sat all their players. They just played the Spurs and Pistons in this last stretch when they've gotten on this hot streak of late. So we'll see how it goes over the course of the year. But look, New Orleans is first in the West. Zion is playing. They've had some other, Brandon Ingram's missed some time. They've had guys in and out of the lineup. You got to feel great if you're the Pelicans, where you're at a third of the way through the season. And if Zion could continue to make plays defensively and take the step forward that he has the last couple of weeks for another couple months, like this team, especially in a Western Conference, it's absolutely wide open. We just talked about Phoenix not being that great. You got to start to look at them at that point as a team that could legitimately be a top 2 or 3 seed. They could legitimately be seen as a favorite to get out of the conference. And, if you'd said to the Pelicans, you're going to be a top 4 seed potentially before the season, they would have ran with that. They would have been absolutely thrilled. So, I think you got to be thrilled about the way they start if you're somebody with New Orleans.
Let me give you another number, you hot breath hater. Zion Williamson, when he is on the floor this season, not the last 2 weeks, like you acting like this is just something that's a fluke, a little, like it'll come and go like a cold. When he's on the floor this season, their defensive rating is 104.2.
Yeah.
Okay. He's been a plus on the defensive end this season. Now he's not guarding the other team's best player, but he's been active. You've asked him, hey, can we see the playmaking you saw at Duke? You are seeing that. They are a dominant defensive team when him on the floor. And there's only 2 rotation players who have lower defensive ratings or better defensive ratings on the Pelicans than Zion. Dyson Daniels, Jose Alvarado. And those are 2 guys. They are in the rotation because of defense. Now, the other thing that's really encouraging about that is these are guys who, one's a rookie, one's a second-year guy. They've got a chance to be there for a long, long time alongside Zion. By the way, one other crazy stat real quick. You mentioned Ingram's only played 15 games. Ingram's missed a bunch of time. When Ingram's on the floor, their offensive rating is 121.8, aka better than the Boston Celtics, who have the best offense in NBA history right now.
I'll just say, if you ask the Pelicans, I don't think they would say Zion has been a plus defensive player all year. That's what I would say.
They don't give up a lot of points when he's on the floor, you doofus.
Hey,
that's usually a good sign. Okay, especially when he's blocking shots, he's getting deflections, he's getting steals.
Yes, he's been doing that the past 2 weeks. I just want to see him do that for longer. That's all.
The best is, he comes in. I don't know if he does this every night, but he one night, Will Guillory, who covers the team for the Athletic, this is about maybe 3-4 weeks ago, asked Zion. It was a bad night for Zion defensively that night, and he asked Zion to grade his own defense, and with a letter grade. And Zion asked back, "Well, what would you give me? Is it on defense?" So Zion's been coming in and asking the media to grade his defense. At least he's done it multiple times. Since he's done that, his defense has been improving. So I know it's multifaceted, but when you're going to ask for a grade publicly after games, it may improve your
hey, listen,
motivation.
If he's going to keep averaging 1.8 steals and over a block a game going forward, the Pelicans are going to be in great shape. Like
he just has to be. He's in obviously much better shape than he's been in. He just has to be engaged. Jason Kidd challenges Luka, participate. He has to participate because they can really, I mentioned Alvarado and Daniels. I didn't even mention Herb Jones, who's, in his second year is already like a all defense type of player. I mean, they've got a really, really, really good young defensive core to complement these guys that are scorers.
All right. Before we go, I'm a little bit afraid to talk about the Heat because they're playing the Clippers tonight at home. And we have a way of jinxing players and also saying stuff about teams. And then they, by the time it publishes everything.
I don't know if we is the way to attribute that. Let's say ever since the Hoop Collective column has started appearing on Tuesdays, Brian has weekly jinxed something. It's just a matter of what it is.
Anyway, the Heat are 11-14 right now. They played the Clippers. Maybe they'll have the greatest game in recent Heat history tonight, but they've been banged up. Jimmy Butler's been in and out. Tyler Hero's been in and out. Bam Adebayo's been up and down. They're always playing different lineups. But Bontemps, you wrote a little thing in the Hoop Collective column this week. You caught them in Boston last week when they beat the Celtics. Great performance in Boston, signature win of the season. And they were kind of beating their chests a little bit. And then they subsequently went out and lost to Memphis, who was missing arguably their top four players. By the way, speaking of Memphis, the Grizzlies, like at midnight on Wednesday night, put out a Desmond Bane injury update and announced he was going to be out at least another month. So
another 3 or 4 weeks, but yeah.
3 or 4 weeks before there would be an update. They didn't say 3 or 4 weeks before.
No, 3 or 4 weeks. And if he progresses, he's projected to return.
Okay. You're right. Yeah, anyway, he's going to be
out past Christmas.
Anyway, they lost that game in Memphis, and then they came home to Detroit and lost that game. But Bontemps, you talked to them and like you had the quote in the story. Spoelstra was like, "Forget about our record. We're fine. We're good. We're doing great." And everybody's like, "You're not doing great." It's rare that Pat Riley takes heat, so to speak, and the Heat fans are going for the Heat front office for not improving the roster in the offseason. Although again, I still think they've been banged up more than anything, and it's not like PJ Tucker, who they just wouldn't go to the same amount of money on for as Philly. It's not like PJ Tucker's lighting up the league. That's the central guy that they lost. But Bontemps, you just saw them. They are as confident as ever, regardless of where they're at. Coming off the conference finals and right now in 10th place.
Well, they're a weird team because I think if you look at, like, I've got their lineups here in front of me. So their most used lineup played 120 minutes. It's plus 7.4 per 100. Second most used lineup is plus 12. The third most used lineup is plus 30.6. The fourth is plus 10.6. Like, those are all lineups that have played 50 or more minutes. Mm-hmm. So, like, when their guys are healthy, they have been pretty good. A big part of why they haven't been good is Jimmy Butler missed a bunch of time. They had Kyle Lowry playing the most minutes in the league because he was playing with everybody out for about a week, and they lost 4 or 5 games in a row by a couple of points.
They're sitting Lowry tonight.
Right. He's having a rest game for the first game he's missed all season. I mean, he's been much better than he was last year. He was dealing with some personal stuff over the second half of last year. Then he had some injuries. He's been much better. So I do think they're going to be better. And I think if you look at, you got Boston and Philly or Milwaukee way ahead of the field in the East and in the league, frankly. And then you've got a whole bunch of teams that on a given night are good, but are flawed. Cleveland, Philly, Toronto, Miami, you want to try to throw Atlanta in there. Maybe you could just look at the standings.
As of this moment, okay, the Bulls are in 12th. They're 10-14. Washington, 11-14. Miami, 11-14. New York, 12-13. Philly, 12-12. Toronto, 13-12. Indiana, 13-12. Atlanta, 13-12. Brooklyn, 14-12. So just in the loss column, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 teams within 2 games of each other in the loss column. So right, I guess if Cleveland, you're the Heat, you're like, well, then there's a gap, and then Cleveland's kind of alone.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think Cleveland's they're totally separate. They're much more good than flawed.
Right.
But no, they are. But they also
cut you off, Bontemps, but like the Heat have a good week and a half, and they could be in fourth.
Well, and that's why they feel confident, right? Like, it's weird. Like I said, if you take out Boston and Milwaukee, because they're just in their own class in the league, you take the top 8 or 9 teams in the West, the next several teams in the East. I think if you put them all in a hat, you have them play on a given day. It's kind of a toss up. And if you're a team like the Heat, who's had all these injuries, who's struggled so far, like you said, you look at it, you're 2 games out of fourth. It's like, all right, like, we're going to be fine. When our guys are healthy, we can play with Boston. We can win against anybody. Now, they are dealing with Jimmy Butler, who's older and regularly misses games. Kyle Lowry is in his mid to late 30s. He's already played the most minutes in the league. Tyler Hero has been banged up and in and out of the lineup. You know, Bam plays a physical style. Bam Adebayo, he's going to miss a little bit of time here and there. So, like, you do have some potential injury issues there. They're hoping Victor Oladipo could give him something. He finally played for the first time this week. So there are a lot of ifs with the Heat, but, you know, I can see why they would look at it and say, hey, we could be just as good as anybody when we get healthy. I think the better question, and it goes along with Phoenix and Dallas, is it still feels like this team is a player or two short of being where they need to be in terms of competing for a title. And I'm not sure how they're going to get that kind of player. You know, they're in sort of the same boat that those teams are. So I don't know. What are your thoughts on them, MacMahon?
I don't think Wendy liked what you had to say, because he got up and exited the conversation.
I was trying to expertly vamp, but you of course derailed it.
Sorry, I had a little intra-house issue I had to deal with.
I suspect I know what that was.
Yeah, I don't blame the Heat for having confidence. Like, look, Jimmy Butler's always going to feel like he's got a chance to contend, but probably needs a little bit more showing, and before I'm willing to listen to much more telling out of them, right?
Well, by the way, in that game in Boston on Friday, it was Jimmy Butler who was like, "I'm going to win this game," and did. Like, when he's good, he's still as good as literally anybody.
Yeah, he came back and basically announced, like, I'm still one of the best players in the NBA. But, you know, I don't think, though, that the Heat are anywhere near the conversation of being a contender in the East. I think there's 3 tiers of playoff teams in the East. You know, Bucks, Celtics, Bucks right now. Second tier is the Cavs. Third tier is everyone else. And, you know, the Heat are just somewhere stuck with everyone else. And I don't think everyone else has a real chance to come out of that conference.
I think there's 2 teams that have a chance to come out of it, period. But, you know.
Yeah, I just, you know, I think the Heat are in a bit of a transition spot here. Their team is older.
Mm-hmm.
You know, at least Butler and Lowry are older. And they are, because they're Miami, they're always not on the front burner, but in the back of their folder and their binder. They're always looking at who might potentially become available, who may want to
and whoever's always, you know, whoever potentially becomes available, guess what? There was, that guy loves Miami. You know,
right.
How many stars around the league have you heard? Oh man, that guy loves. They all love Miami. Who doesn't? They all love Miami.
Right. But over the decades, they've gotten those. They exactly. Haven't gotten them all. They've
gotten a lot of them.
So
they've gotten a lot of them.
You know, like
including Jimmy Butler.
They got within obviously a basket of being in the finals last year. They'll hang around there, but like I'm not. If I'm a Heat fan and I'm frustrated about this season, I would just say, just chill. Just chill. Jimmy will be playing when it matters. They'll be a threat when it matters. Maybe they have a run this year, maybe they don't. But they're not gonna like put a first round pick into a deal to trade Duncan Robinson.
Yeah.
To maybe fight their way a spot or two ahead in the rotation. They're going to save their options for when they can go get somebody. And I know that if something goes sideways, the Nets are playing well right now. They're on this long homestand. They're winning games. So the pressure is off them a little bit, but that's who everybody's watching. What happens with Brooklyn? And I'm not saying that they would go all in on that situation, but I just think when it comes to the Heat making significant moves to their roster, they always have to be mindful that they don't want to close any doors. And they typically are mindful. They typically have themselves in position. So they know they've got a chance, a team, and they'll try to maximize what they have. But because I just see people just I saw Pat Riley was trending today. And I was like, why is Pat Riley trending? And it's all these Heat fans ripping the Heat's front office for
he hasn't earned just a little bit of benefit of the doubt.
Right.
Oh my God.
I would just say, I did think that they were a little chesty after that win. I mean, granted, they definitely
were chesty. Like they were like, hey, we're healthy, we're going to be good. And then they proceeded to have a terrible 2 games in a row.
And then they lost to the Memphis Hustle and the Detroit Pistons.
The window curse just took them down. Just absolutely took them down.
This will be the reverse. Now I'll say this. By the way, we'll see what Kawhi does tonight. Kawhi has not looked great. Here we go. I've just done it.
Ain't playing. Back to back. Come on, man. No.
Was it last night? Felt like 2 nights ago. The game in Charlotte, he was 4 of 15, and he just didn't look like himself, which, okay, he's coming off knee surgery and a sprained ankle. But anyway, that's another topic for another day. All right. Thank you.
Will not play in the second of a back-to-back tonight, as expected, Ohm says. As expected, Wendy.
Was the Charlotte game last night? In my head, it felt like 2 nights ago.
No, it was the Orlando game was last night when they lost to the Magic in OT. Things are going great with the Clippers.
I'm watching. I can't keep it all straight. He won in Charlotte. He had a jumper that won the game in Charlotte. Last night was in Orlando.
They needed a last second shot to beat a horrendous Charlotte team, and then they had their guys playing and lost to a horrendous Orlando team in the next game. Now he's not
in
playing.
Overtime. They went to overtime with Orlando, and
great.
He was 4. I think he was 4 of 15. Okay, that was last night. All right, thank you, listening to the Collective Podcast. I need to go lay down. Thank you, MacMahon and Bontemps. Thank you to Jackson and Bruce, our producers. We will talk to you next week. What day is it?
Adios, amigos.
Straw poll will be out next week. Big week.
Ooh. What?
Big week.
Oh, man.
Adios, amigos, and I'll see you next week, jackasses.
Oh, man. Straw poll.